Have you ever felt the ground vanish beneath your feet? It is that terrifying moment when the life you spent years building, the career, the relationships, the identity, suddenly collapses into a heap of dust. You fall, and the air grows cold as the light of your former world fades away. Most of us spend our entire lives terrified of this descent. We cling to the edges of our comfort zones with bleeding fingernails, desperate to stay above the surface. But for some, the grip fails. You hit the bottom. You land in the abyss, a place of absolute silence and darkness. And it is here, in the wreckage of your own life, that you discover the most profound secret of the human spirit. The abyss is not a grave. It is a foundation to the shadow explorer. Hitting rock bottom is not a tragedy. It is an invitation to a radical rebirth. It is the moment when the letting go is no longer a choice, but a requirement. When you have lost everything, you are finally free from the burden of maintaining a false image. You are finally forced to look at the raw, unvarnished truth of who you are when there is nothing left to hide behind. Consider the story of a man named Marcus. Marcus was a man who lived for the applause of the world. He was a high-stakes entrepreneur who measured his worth by the size of his bank account and the envy in his rivals' eyes. He was a master of discipline, but it was a cold, rigid discipline used to suppress his insecurities. Then, the collapse came. A series of catastrophic failures stripped him of his wealth, his reputation, and his social circle. Within months, Marcus found himself in a small, empty apartment, staring at a ceiling that seemed to be closing in on him. He had hit rock bottom in the beginning. The abyss was unbearable. Marcus felt like a ghost haunting his own life. He waited for someone to save him, but no one came in that crushing silence. He was forced to hear the voices he had spent decades drowning out. The voice of his own loneliness, the voice of his unhealed trauma, and the voice of a deep existential fear. He realized that his entire life had been a performance. He had been flying on wings made of other people's expectations, and when the wind changed, those wings had melted. One night, Marcus sat on the cold floor of his apartment, and a strange thought occurred to him. He realized that for the first time in his life, he was no longer afraid of falling. Why? Because the ground he was sitting on was solid. This is the stoic epiphany of the abyss. When you lose the things you were afraid of losing, the fear itself vanishes. He realized that the rock bottom he had feared his whole life was actually the first solid ground he had ever stood upon. Every structure he had built before was on the shifting sands of external validation. But this was the bedrock. This is the gift of the abyss. It strips away the ego until only the soul remains. In the philosophy of Zen, there is a concept of the beginner's mind. Hitting rock bottom forces you back into that state. You are a blank slate. You have the opportunity to rebuild your life, not according to the blueprints of the world, but according to the truth of your own heart. Marcus began the slow, painstaking process of integration. He didn't try to go back to his old life. Instead, he stayed in the silence. He practiced the discipline of looking at his shadows without flinching. He realized that his control had always been an illusion. He couldn't control the markets, the opinions of others, or the passage of time. But he could control his own character. He could control his reaction to the void. He started to build a new life, brick by brick. He took a humble job that allowed him to serve others. He spent his evenings reading philosophy and walking in the woods. He discovered that the air tasted sweeter, the colors of the sunset were deeper, and his connections with people were more authentic because he was no longer trying to impress them. He found that the abyss had given him a strength that the heights never could. It was the strength of someone who has seen the worst and survived. Most people fly with heavy hearts, burdened by the fear of falling. But once you have hit the bottom and realize the earth will hold you, you gain a different kind of flight. You fly because you have letting go of the weights. You fly because you are no longer tethered to the shore of safety. If you are in the abyss today, if you feel that you have reached the end of your strength, I want you to listen to the silence. Do not try to climb out just yet. Sit with the broken pieces. Look at them. Realize that the person you were had to break so that the person you are meant to be could emerge. The abyss is the womb of your transformation. The floor you have hit is not your ending. It is your foundation. It is the solid rock upon which you will build a life that is unshakable. You had to hit rock bottom to realize that the ground is solid. And once you know the ground is solid, you can finally spread your wings without fear. The greatest heights are only reachable by those who have survived the deepest depths. Your fall was not a mistake. It was the wind beneath your future wings. Embrace the gift, rebuild on the rock, and watch how high you fly when you have nothing left to fear.